Okay, this is going to be different for me to get used to. I'm used to just talking really loud. Like she said, I'm Annie, and she told you all about me, why I'm here, and I run the craft shop, and I am perfect at nothing and imperfect at a whole bunch. So let's get started. How many of you here are professional long armers or own a long arm machine? How many of you have a professional that you go to, either local or that you mail to? How many of you have never sent a quilt to be quilted? Have a big pile of tops sitting in your house? Yeah. Never sent anything, never had anything quilted. No one? Guess which one I am? Who has a guess? The last one. I have never sent a quilt to be quilted. I have some that are quilted. And yeah, I have notes here just so that everybody knows, but I'm really horrible about talking with notes. After all of my time in the Army, I'm just used to like, okay, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna keep looking at my notes because I'm not talking to soldiers right now, and I don't want you guys to get that treatment. So let me look at my notes a little bit. It's funny I was an instructor in the Army. I instructed officer candidate school, so it was like a drill sergeant on crack. And one of the first things that you do when you're in front of a group of people is establish your credibility, right? This is how long I've been doing it. I've been in the Army so many years, and I've done this, and I've done that. I took this class, and I'm so cool. And I literally just sat here and told you guys that I've never sent a quilt to be quilted. I've never had anybody long arm any of my stuff. Also, you guys heard the other Annie say that I have been sewing for a really long time, but started quilting in 2019. Quilted my first quilt block in 2020 during the COVID lockdown. Stuck in Germany, did a lot of quilting and a lot of research on quilting because I had nothing else to do in Germany for 2 years. So once again, not a professional at anything, but that's why I'm here to talk to you about Longarming 101, the very basics, the very lowest step, okay? And my credibility comes with I'm just like some of you, not very many of you, okay, I'm just like me here today. But at some point in time, we hadn't had a quilt done, we didn't know what we were doing, etc., right? So I am that lowest totem pole of what the crap am I doing when I get this top finished after I figured out the piecing and stuff. So how much is long arming going for around here?
Depends
On
how intricate it is. If it's
let's just go edge to edge.
Simple edge to edge.
2 to 3 cents per square inch.
Yeah.
Okay. A throw size quilt, about 3,000 square inches, $60 to $90. Okay. I'm the queen of throw quilts. I'll just tell you that right now. But when you start getting up into the bigger king and queen, you're looking at closer to 12,000 square inches. Who wants to do the math real quick? That's $250 to $350, right? And we've already spent $200 on fabric, easy. And then we have to do binding, and the time that we've spent, batting, not to mention binding. So all the time that we've spent and everything else, it gets really super expensive. There's nothing wrong with that, but what I'm here to talk about today is that there are options, okay? At the craft shop, we have a long arm machine that we'll teach you to use. And so the one gal this morning that did the machine quilting class basically taught my class or did my presentation for me. Let's not be scared of it. It's fun, right? You can do it, whether you like to draw or not. And I was sitting there like, lady, why'd you get to go first? So just think of everything she said, and instead of doing machine, quilting on your domestic machine, just think about that on the long arm. It's exactly the same kind of thing. You don't have to like drawing, you don't really have to know what you're doing, and you don't have to be perfect with it, and you can still be really proud of it, okay? So today I'm gonna show you a couple of my very firsts. I'm gonna show you the first quilt that I pieced, just because it happens to be the first quilt that I quilted, and then some of my pantographs and some of my ruler work, and then finally some of my automated stuff. So, the class. You can quilt, throw quilt for about $20, really,
If you come do it yourself at your shop.
at my
on
shop.
your machine.
So the class is $20. It's gonna go up to $50, as soon as I know what I'm doing. We just barely got pro stitcher, so I'm still really learning. I know really well how to load it. I know a lot of the tips and tricks. But as soon as we get a good handle on how to teach beginning to end from the manual's free motion on, it'll go up a little bit from that. And specifically, if you bring your own quilt that you just want to start with, you can get it done for $20 if it's small enough. $20 plus $10 an hour if it's bigger than that. So you're looking at pretty substantial savings, but you get what you pay for, right? We all know we get what we pay for. But for some of us, that should be okay. My quilt shop is covered in quilts that are my first. How many of you went to the Eastern Idaho State Fair? Saw a lot of my quilts sitting around, a lot with not red ribbons or blue, or not first place, okay? It was pink and white was my color this year. But you saw a lot of my firsts, and I'm putting them out there and I'm displaying them because they don't need to be good enough. They're good enough for me to sink my entire Army retirement into, and all day, every day, at my shop in teeny tiny Blackfoot, sometimes silent as ever. My quilts are good enough for me to do that. So I want you guys to know that your quilt should be good enough to do that too. There are some things that we know. I had some things your long armor wish you knew. Do stay stitching around the edges so that your seams stay. And also that's gonna help you catch when you have stretched seams and stretched edges, so you don't come back and blame that on your long armor when you've got bunches around it.
What's stay stitching?
Stay stitching is basically a shorter basting stitch, but it's about an eighth of an inch in from the edge of the quilt top, just on the quilt top. I'm not explaining this very well. Let me start over. Also, the Army was very kind and took my ability to find the words that I'm looking for, so sometimes it takes me a second to get to where I'm going. But on your finished quilt top, a stay stitch is about 1/8 of an inch in, and you just do a simple stitch. I'm a zigzagger. I don't know if that's loved, hated, or whatever, but I'm a zigzagger. And you just do that around the edge, and it'll keep all of your seams because we don't back stitch, right? Typically.
So just around the edges of the quilt.
Just your quilt top.
It's a victory lap.
Not all.
Your victory lap. Love it. Yeah. Not through anything else. Just
Just around the edges of the quilt top.
Yep, it just makes everything stay nice.
Don't pull your fabric borders on that quilt top.
What's up?
Do you do the stay stitching even if you just have borders on the quilt top?
You can.
Okay.
You still, even if you have borders, you're still gonna have the seams. And bacon borders. Do y'all know what bacon borders are? Bacon borders are what happens when you just stitch fabric onto the edge of a quilt and then cut it afterwards, okay? Every single time it happens. We can tell, can't we, Lauralee? Yeah. I do instruct classes at the very beginner level in Blackfoot at my shop as well. And I'll let the people, you obviously come to class and you have 2 weeks to work on it on your own. And they'll come back and they'll have borders on, and I'm like, so how'd you do your border? Because I can tell that you just put some fabric on there, and we didn't pin and we didn't measure because you got the bacon edges. So the stay stitching will help with the bacon edges, yes. And there was another question about not doing what, folding?
Don't stretch your borders when you're doing that stay stitching. Don't pull on the fabric.
Nothing. Just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
Trust the process. And also just kind of make sure that your seams are the right way so that you don't get the weird flip. I get the weird flip. You know what the weird flip is? where your seam is supposed to be going one way and you accidentally catch it on your feed dots and so it flips the other way. And then you have a weird bump in the middle of your seam and it's always in the white part and really losing it. Okay. So the stay stitch, we talked about that. And where do we start at? So I'm actually in the middle of a class right now. We loaded the quilt last night and we're getting ready to do our basic stitch across the top. And she didn't square a quilt. And she used flannel and Joanne's fabric and fabric from my shop and some stuff that she bought off of the internet. Okay, so it's really adorable and I'm not judging, but everyone understands why that's a problem, right? Anybody who doesn't understand why that's a problem? Okay, so when you're using the different kind of fabrics, specifically quilt quality fabrics, which are more tightly woven, versus Joanne's fabric, which are treated with things and not as tightly woven, so they're treated with stuff to make them feel a little more stiff, but they're not really, versus flannel, which is completely different than all of it. You're going to get different tension, you're going to get it moving through your machine differently, and everything just doesn't go together right. Plus, when you're a brand new quilter, not a sewer, but a quilter, all of the time, everybody, when they first start quilting, when they're doing that perfect 1/4 inch seam, your 1/4 inch seam is perfect, a 1/4 inch from the beginning and a 1/4 inch from the end, okay? You always will lead into it and you always will lead out of it. That's a different class about leaders and enders, but we all do it, and she's learning why it's important not to do that. So little bonus lesson in this quilt class that she's getting, but it just happens to us. Our needle pokes down, moves fabric around when we don't use a leader, which is a different class. But anyways, it just happens, okay? All of our first seams go like this.
Plus, Annie, when you use all those fabrics, they wash
Completely
really
different.
differently.
That's a whole different story.
Yeah, that's another reason to
Yeah.
use.
It's
So,
kind of like sheets with different thread counts.
right. Can you imagine a nice Egyptian cotton on the bottom, Walmart on the top? Right? Just doesn't go together. So, anyhow, we have this quilt loaded and we're trying to just do the straight basting stitch across the top. And you lock the machine so it gives you your perfect, very first straight horizontal line so that you can line everything else up. And we can't get that. And we're bunching fabric up and we're turning it under and we're trying really hard. So, and there's no stay stitch, so stuff is coming undone. And so she's getting an extra lesson. I really don't know where I was going with that, but that's the problem that we're having. Oh, I'm talking about starting points. So we very may well wind up a little bit of this quilt tonight before we actually start quilting the design on it. Start in the middle, move down, and then move back up the design as we go and see how much of that will wiggle its way out. But that's something that you would learn to do when you come and take a class with me, something that your long armers already know. And something that you may not know, something that can be fixed if you can square off your quilt, something that you may run into a problem with. You know, if you send your stuff off to be quilted and you get it back, I just want you to kind of understand some of the things that go wrong.
Can you talk about pressing?
I can certainly talk about pressing. Which part of pressing? Yes, press your quilts. Try to make sure that, don't iron your quilts, okay? Everybody know the difference between pressing and ironing? Okay, when we iron, we go like this, okay? We don't want to ever, ever, ever do this because ironing stretches all of our fabrics and then all of our seams, and especially if we have anything on the bias, it completely destroys it. Bias is a diagonal cut, okay? Pressing, we press all of our seams straight down. I am such an awesome gal that I have a heat press, a big 16-inch platen heat press, that if I was gonna send anything off to be quilted, it would go in the heat press first, nice and flat. Also available for use if you're sending anything, or if you're coming in to quilt your own quilt, because it's that awesome and that important. And also you wanna make sure you don't have any of those twisted seams. Make sure that you don't have any super seam bulk where a whole bunch of seams come together right in the middle, because inevitably that is where the needle is going to go and it's gonna snap off and it's gonna quilt an entire line without you watching it. And it sucks. So, Did I cover everything you wanted me to cover with pressing?
How, when you're pressing your seams, when you're creating your quilt, make sure your seam is open all the way. Finger press it open first and then press it. And don't be afraid to use starch. Starch the crud out of your quilt because it'll be more accurate in the long run. And then when you have all your seams, when you're seaming your quilt on the back, I'm sorry, I don't need to take this over from you.
No,
When you're
just
seaming
remember.
your quilt on the back, if you're pressing all these seams going this way and all these seams going that way, that's great. Make sure you do it consistently throughout the whole quilt. Don't have these seams going this way, these seams going that way, and then these seams going that way, but it's turned in the middle, halfway through here. So you have like a bunched up wad of fabric in the back. It should just lay perfectly flat on the back. Your seams, just perfectly flat.
Which brings us to the Lone Star quilt. It'll quilt out, okay?
Oh,
So, yes, all of these things are super important, and they're important for your long armors, but it's also important when you're doing it yourself, because that's the stuff that's gonna break your needle and mess you up and get you frustrated when you're trying to learn how to do this all by yourself, or you're even just babysitting my machine because you wanna pay by the hour and not the square inch, right? It'll quilt itself out. That's a real thing, okay? Once again, we don't want to expect perfection. Not so much with your long armors. When you're sending and paying that money, you get what you pay for. Press it down and send it out how you want it to look when it comes back. If you want perfection and you want professionalism, be professional when you send that top off. Make sure that everything is pressed, your stay stitches are done, and things are going to stay how they need to be, okay? And square off your quilts, please. But the whole "it will quilt out" thing is also a very true statement. And there's some times that we just kind of screw something up. Really take care of your bulky seams, try to nest them if you can, and it'll quilt out. All right, we can use quilting to take care of a lot of the little mistakes that we have. The most important part, do not cut your backing or your batting to the size of your front. Okay, we can't work with it. I'm on so many groups in Facebook that are like, oh my gosh, I just started longarming and this lady dropped this off and I thought I could make it work and now she wants her money back. And I'm like, why did you take it in the first place?
yeah.
Because no way. Okay, if you've cut everything to size and everything is all the same size, I think I've turned you away for it. I've known Laura Lee for a long time. So, and she's been at my shop a lot. And we've tried to muddle through, just trying to help and get it the same size as you would if you were tying it. Sometimes I do what I did the first few times. So always make sure that you have at least 4 to 6 inches on either side, top, bottom, left, right, of extra backing and a little bit extra batting either way too, especially because the batting ruffles on the edges as well. And we just need to be able to work and maneuver it. And you'll want to be able to work and maneuver it if you're doing it yourself. So the cost, then we're going to go into new cost. Before we talked about 2 to 3 cents per square inch. A throw would cost you 60 to 90. You can get it done 20 to 30 bucks if you do it yourself.
Before you go into cost on batting, do you like us to bring our own bats, or do you want to use your own?
I don't have a preference.
And what about most long armors? What do they like?
They will have a preference and they'll let you know.
Okay.
I wouldn't know about most long armors. They've never
I
sent
just
it
wonder if
us.
do they really use it? Or do
They will.
just use their own?
So you're gonna contact your long armor first. There's a lot of things if you're sending a piece off to be quilted. There's a lot of things you're gonna have to discuss with them. How much, some of them are gonna want 12 inches top and bottom extra because they don't like to use leaders, or they need to use that as a leader, or they use different types of leaders in the pin-ons. Mine takes 2 inches, right? Some of them have clips and bars that take 8 inches. So you're gonna have to pick your design, your thread color, whether you want it to match or contrast. They're gonna talk to you about batting. They're gonna talk to you about whether they have batting, whether they'll take batting, whether they'll take Pellon or Warm Company, or what they prefer. So a lot of conversations are gonna happen before you actually send your top to be quilted. A lot of things are gonna happen. if you're doing it yourself, those are questions that you're gonna have to ask yourself as well and just discuss kind of with yourself. So it would be the batting that you like at that time.
I have another question. On the stitching, do they always have to be so close? Sometimes I just like the
No,
old-fashioned soft puffy quilt.
no,
And so sometimes I just like this.
I'm gonna get to that
Oh,
part.
you're getting to
Yeah,
that.
we're gonna get to that part. But no, they don't always have to be a little 0-point stitch that's a pain to clip out if you have to rip anything. No, it does not have to be. So we were talking about prices, right? 20 to 30, king or queen, 50 to 100. Okay, I've never charged anybody over $100. My prices have been a little bit lower. I'm in introductory pricing still, but you could get this done for $50 to $100 if you're okay with not having it perfect, okay? Or if the quilter inside of you says, I can do this, because that's what most of us think in this room, isn't it? We walk through the Hobby Lobby and we're like, that's cute, I can make it, right?
Yeah.
And we snap the picture really quietly, or, oh, my husband has a saw, I bet he could do that, right? So this is how I got into the whole long arm mess anyways, is because I was like, y'all pay $300 to have your quilts quilted just to put someone needle and thread through. What? I didn't know. I was in Germany. Like, they don't do that there. And so I thought, heavens no, heck no. And I had tried the machine, the domestic machine stuff, and that was just way too much for me. The rolling and the paying attention and the puckering is just not my thing. So I did try it though. I want everyone to know, don't write it off until you tried it, okay? And the gal this morning really almost had me inspired to try it again on something 10 by 10. So I might try it. So now I get to talk about the firsts. Why should we not be scared to do our own longarming? Well, just because we shouldn't. So many of you have seen this quilt in many different forms. This is the all famous Idaho quilt that I wrote when I was homesick in Germany. And I get to tell you guys the whole story. So I went on the Stash Dash in 2000, Shop Hop in 2018, right before I deployed to Germany, and bought some American Jane fabric. Didn't know how much I needed or what I was going to do with it. Carried it over the pond with me because I knew I was going to be in Germany and actually had time to like sit at a sewing machine because remember the 5 kids and all the dogs and everything. So got there, realized that I didn't have enough fabric to do what I wanted to do after I kind of drafted this pattern. So took my first train into Frankfurt, found me a little quilt shop and bought some fabric. And so I plussed it all up and then I designed this on the floor in my loft in my apartment in Germany. I had this cute little fat quarter and I learned a lot about having to cut your squares bigger when you want to piece them together. I learned quilt math right there. So there's a lot of interfacing involved with this little heart here because I didn't know. And I was teaching myself and I didn't know. And so anywho, I finished the quilt top and I'm like, when I get a long arm machine, I'm quilting this myself. And I just knew that. So when I first opened my shop, just the quilt top was hanging and that was it. I got my long arm machine ordered, I got it there and I threw this sucker on. I was reading the instructions and I was pinning here and I was doing it on my beloved Idaho quilt, right? So how's it look? Okay. It's a disaster. Tis like, oh, I worked myself into a really big dither there. Oh, this is horrible. That was when I hit the bottom and I couldn't figure out how to get myself out of the corner. I crossed over a few times. If you look enough times, you'll find it. Oh, there's a really sharp point. It's a disaster. Absolute just mess.
And she's the only one.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great.
Point taken?
Oh, that's fine. It's great.
I'm stretching.
Right?
Yeah.
Not scary at all.
You don't see all those things on the
This hangs in my shop. Everyone sees this. Every time you walk in and talk to me, you get to see this. And you know what everyone says to me? Oh my gosh, I love that. I have to take patterns with me everywhere I go and I sell them with them really quick. And I look at it and go, oh my God, that's where I started. right? Adorable, Annie, you're adorable, I say.
Let's see the back.
The back is very plain. First time buying a white back was like, all right, cool. Got this, my binding for free, didn't know what I was doing. Just took a needle and thread and kind of tried it. I was bored. So that's kind of what the point I'm trying to make. So the long arm has got a laser on the back, so we can follow a pantygram. So me, being ever so thrifty as I am, was like, I can just print something off the internet, and I can just print it a whole bunch of times and tape it together and tape it on the back, and I'll just follow it with the laser, because I'm not spending $15 on a pantygram. Just open my shop. I already got my whole retirement into Moda and Riley Lake, okay? I'm not, whatever. So this is how cool I am. And I printed this off, and I thought, oh, it'll be simple. Okay. So then I made this cute quilt. This one's not very big, Annie. Not well.
That's cute.
And I tried to use that panto on the back. It's horrible. It crosses over. None of it is, you want to see? The professional,
done that.
right? So I'm actually going to let you.
Yeah, lining up a panto is real fun.
Yeah, this is, I was got a little close. Not exactly the same, but I was learning like my groove, because you can't just stand there, you gotta do the hula with the machine. So there was my attempt. And then, as soon as I got that done, and I was like, oh, I'm making quilts now, I'm a quilter. I decided that I would try, you always laugh.
Oh, boy.
Look at all the direction changes.
What were you thinking?
Right? I mean, you know, some of you don't even have any idea, but no. Okay. But tell me how bad it looks. Excuse my level of doneness. I own a quilt shop, which means I teach classes and don't have a lot of time. But tell me what you think. Horrible, right? Absolutely horrible. That thing was so hard to do, but it's great. I'm gonna take it to Quilt Guild, and I'm gonna show it off to all of the ladies who do trunk shows.
Annie, where did you get your panto from? What website?
Pinterest.com. Copy and paste into Silhouette Studio, make a couple copies and print her off. Yep. Pretty sure that this one is actually on Urban Elements though. Pretty sure that's right. I'm telling you, there's a reason my shop is quilts, crafts, and DIY. Okay, I try to do everything myself first. But man, I did a good job. I'm proud of me on this, and this was hard. This is very hard. So no one's gonna notice. No one ever walks in and said, "Oh, you crossed your lines."
It's like riding a bike.
Yeah.
You're doing a panto, you just got.
Girl, that was not like riding a bike. That was like riding a unicycle. I was like, oh, gosh.
Exactly.
Yes, that was
You're trying.
not fun.
You're trying to follow the moving dot.
So, well, eventually with this one, because also it's so small, so you know, I had a lot of rows to do. Eventually I got to where I knew it, so I just kind of started doing the dance.
Yeah. You had cellular
Yep.
memory.
So then I decided, A, to dabble into applique, bless my soul. And I decided to do some echo work, which I thought turned out kind of cool, even though my throat's not big enough. The opening, for those of you who don't know, the opening for my machine is not long enough to accommodate that whole flower box. So I had to kind of meet in the middle and then join back up. Can you tell? Didn't think so. Right? We don't have to be scared. And then I did my first ruler work. It's not straight. I broke 4 needles. I broke holes in my ruler. It was scary, but I did it. Okay? And I figured it out, and I'm learning. I have the worst job ever. Ever.
It's so cute.
That one was fun. So then I got Pro Stitcher last week. And this quilt was a virtual quilt along I did with my aunt while I was locked down in Germany, and she was not locked down in America. So I didn't know anything about these triangles and stuff. So, I learned some things, but I wanted to make sure that when this one got quilted, this was a real quilt that really meant something. This wasn't just something I was throwing together for my shop. It wasn't something I was doing to highlight fabrics, that I just needed to get something easy, which is what almost all the rest of these are. This was something that I had done that really meant something, and I knew I would know the quilting when I found it. And I wanted it to be special, and I wanted it to be something. I just didn't know what. And this was actually going to be the first or second quilt that I was going to send off to be quilted until I actually decided to get Pro Stitcher and get automated. So this still took me 4 days. I learned a whole lot. Some of my stitches still cross over because I had to learn how to advance my quilt correctly. I can't tell and I don't care. Okay, my little flowers, my little rainbows and my clouds go with my little house and my little Moda village, and I don't care and I love it. So there's going to be some times when, I also didn't make it all the way over to the edge, and then I had a complete black screen and had to redo it, so it's all different sizes too. So that's okay though. This is literally my first one. I threw it on and I pushed some buttons. Hopped on a website and was like, download and do that one. So, but it still turns out cute. So, also my first contrasting thread one, you notice my clouds are blue. That was horrifying. But anyways, my whole point is that sometimes quilting is the star of the show. Sometimes we put some broadcloth together and we want to. I have another one that I'm still not ready to mess around with because it needs to be custom. Okay, it has some borders, it has some blocks, and it needs to be perfect. And it's not going to be one of the ones that I practice on. But this was my first time working with bias corners and doing that flip over with charm packs. I wanted it to be my first time doing something else. And I think that we should all embrace that. So if you want to learn to embrace that, you can come visit me. If you don't, I don't take offense because, I don't take offense when you shop at other quilt shops because I shop at other quilt shops and then I see what they have and then I'm like, I don't have to buy it, right? I don't have to carry it. Someone will come in and they'll ask for it and I'll be like, nope, I don't have false. Or I'll go up to Shelly, so fun, or wherever, right? So we all kind of share the wealth here. So it's just an option. This is all just about giving you the options, and being proud of what you've done. Having a little bit of comfort in knowing that it's okay if it's not perfect. Some of the things look really horrible. I've done some really horrible things. I didn't bring those ones. They're gone. But yeah, that's kind of my whole point. So are there any other questions about, you had questions about stitch length. I didn't get to bring it because I gave it away, but I tried my first jelly roll quilt with some really ugly Ruby Star Society fabric. My mom just loved it. She had to have it. So I'm trying to figure this out. So I set my stitch length to be bigger stitches, and I stood at one end of the machine, and this is straight lines, right? Just a strip quilt, and I pushed the machine over. I didn't lock anything, no horizontal lines, no nothing. I just stood there and went, and I pushed it over. All these big long stitches and small stitches, and sometimes it kind of stopped in the middle, and I had to nudge it the rest of the way. And it turned out so cool because that quilt was ugly. You know what Ruby Star Society fabric is? Tula Pink makes Ruby Star makes Tula Pink look pastel. You know what Tula Pink is? It's bright and it's all of these really weird colors put together. And it looks very vintage. And I just wanted to try this, and it ended up, beets and turnips and yeah. And so, like I said, I just kind of tossed the machine over to see what it would do because the stitches are regulated. We have the regulated by how fast you turn the wheel. I can lift the little wheel up and go, and the needle just goes like that. It's really cool. So it doesn't move or anything, but yeah, just kind of threw it across, and it ended up looking so cool because it was just such a simple quilt. But the quilting really added to it because you can tell the stitches are bigger. And so it kind of adds to it and it shows up a little bit better. And then there's sometimes like the little clouds, my stitches are teeny, teeny tiny because I had just a little bit of room to change directions. And so the more intricate you get, the smaller you want your designs to get, but no, you can have super fun with it. On my cloud one, on this one, there's one line where I forgot to switch for my basting. I was basting the edges down and you did that with a really long stitch and I forgot to switch it. So like my first cloud is like 4 stitches, but I was like, oh, that's super neat. Like now I know I can do it. I went back and stitched over it, but yeah, so you can play with all of the stitches. You can do that freehand. You can do that automated. You can do whatever you want. It's actually really fun. Hurts the back a little bit, but I have chairs. Any other questions or comments or input from the other actual professional long armors? Because that's not what I am. No, well, thank you. Oh, yes.
I just have a question. You said the square up the quilt is where you take it to your
Mhm.
armor. I never square up the quilt like it. Your quilt.
You don't square up the top?
I don't.
You guys are not beginner quilters.
No, they're not. They're
But we
expert.
were.
Huh? And they were
I just
probably a
wondered
little
if
bit.
I should be. That I
If you, so I'm not talking squaring up like we would square a block to sew it to the next one. But I'm talking when I went to measure this quilt that I loaded last night, we were a good inch or 2 off because we'd fold it in half and measure because she still has her seams going off and her squares are all different shapes. So if we would have just kind of thrown that together and gave it a little quick square, even just fold it to the 4s and give it a quick square. And hers is also very simple. It's large, like 8-inch blocks just put together. Okay. No, don't trim off your points.
You know.
Well, there's my secret. I would never send a quilt to be quilted, nor would I put a quilt on a machine that didn't have a border that was, that's how I save my points. Because my binding is, you know. So I would have a border on it and I would measure that border and cut it to the size it's supposed to be before I attached it so I didn't have the bacon edge. And but most of us, when we're a little more intricate and we've been squaring our squares as we go before we even put them together, you just want to make sure that it's straight. So that when we put it on there, like with this one, I can't get that straight line. She's going to lose half of a block just for us trying to get a straight line so that we have something to go on. Not quite half a block, that's exaggerating.
I just had a client that I did 2 quilts for, and it was their first quilts that they'd ever made, a husband and wife, and he picked a woven fabric to go with a quilter's cotton. And so there's lots of fraying on the back side. He didn't get, like it looks on the top when you look at it like there's a 1/4 inch seam, but when you look at the back, it's like, yeah, there's a 1/4 inch there, but over here it's only like maybe 2 threads. So I had to practically re-sew the entire top.
Mm-hmm.
There were like ripples in some of the blocks where he tried to put it onto the border, and so I had to pick that out and straighten it out. Back folds, pick it out, straighten it out. And it's just because that's who I am. I'm a perfectionist and I don't want to send something out the door that I know is going to fall apart.
You bring up such a wonderful point. That's why I won't build your quilts for you. That's why I have a long arm for rent, the machine, not the person. I refuse. You put all of your time, all of your money into this and not taking responsibility for it because my OCD will come out because you know we all have it. And I would never make a dime. I would never make a dime. But you bring up another good point. Did anybody notice that I had stitches that came undone and I totally fixed them with blue thread? You didn't even notice that, did you? See, that's how imperfect we get to be with this. This quilt sat for quite a few years, and somewhere down here, I had whole seams come undone, and I just kind of hurried and went, and I stitched them back up, and there's some funny little stitches in there, but I don't think you'll ever see them. So, again, when we have a professional, we want perfection, right? When I have a quilt that is going to go for a professional, or wait until I'm a little bit closer to there, and I'll probably end up paying the $300 to just set it to somebody who knows what they're doing. knows how to let the quilt talk to them about what it means and do it. That is the village. Are you talking about the actual quilt?
The actual quilt.
The actual quilt is the village. It's a free pattern on Moda. And it's a charm pack buster. Yeah, really super fun. There's my stitches that came undone, and it was literally like the whole thing and right there. I don't know what it got caught on, but I fixed them right there. But there's a place for professional long armers. Bless their souls. I love them. I want to send my quilts to one, never want to be one. And then there's a way to just get your stuff done and have it be yours. Okay? So.
Yeah, it's pretty intimidating the first time you quilt somebody else's quilt. It's like,
Yeah.
especially if you're a quilter, you know the amount of effort you put in, the amount of money and time, and you don't want to make a mistake
Right.
on the quilt.
And it's equally intimidating to start quilting your own quilt. It's like making that first cut into that pretty fabric. It's, but it's really rewarding. So, yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
When we bring in our quilt, you said the backing needed to be 8 inches on each side.
6, 4 to 6 for me.
6?
I had a question here.
So how did, you said you're not supposed to press like this, how are you supposed to press?
Straight up and down. Press it down and then lift your iron up and move it, and then press it down and lift your iron up and move it, and press it down. Don't run. There is one difference. Some of you saw me use the presser bar today to press my seams open. That sits just right so that you can press, you can just kind of move with it, but then you still turn it over and press that seam down flat, straight down. Don't move your iron, don't wiggle it.
When you scrub your fabric, it
So
distorts
you just
the
go once and then,
fabric.
Not even this. We just go straight down and we press this much, and then we pick up the iron and we move it and we press that much.
we do that, okay.
Yep, big quilter secret. Any of you who are actual beginner quilters, I do all of my classes that I do at the craft shop are taught at the beginner level, but like professionals and experts and really great quilters can come and take them too. You just move ahead. And I stick back with you and make sure that you understand what you're doing. So, and we go over all of the things like our scant quarter inches and things like that. I have one more thing to say about backing, but I want to answer your question.
Are you ironing your seams open or side to side?
I hate ironing my seams open, but then we come back to Lone Star and So I'm an iron to the dark sider
Okay.
unless,
That's what mine had, you said to do.
yep,
It depends on the quilt.
Yep.
If there's a lot of bulk in a seam, you can press it open. If it's gonna show really bad on the light side of your fabric, you press it to the dark. I mean, yeah,
so I follow, the pattern is number 1. Okay, what the pattern says, we follow the pattern. Number 2, I press to the dark side. Number 3, I take the easy path. Okay, if it doesn't matter which way we go, it's gonna go easier one way than the other. Like if you have a spot that's joined and you're putting it on a whole cloth, easier to press the whole cloth. Always keeping in mind nesting my seams and the bulk that's gonna happen where they all come together. And then the last thing I pay attention to, of course, is the nesting my seams.
yeah, learn to spin your seams on your 4 patches, or if you have a 3 patch, you can spin your seams really easy. It's not hard.
Spinning your seams means that this seam here, we have 4 patches, right? This seam is gonna go this way, this one will go this way, this one will go this way, this one will go this way. So none of them meet and stack one on top of the other.
So when you look at the back of your 4 patch, you'll have a little tiny 4 patch right where those seams intersect. It'll make a perfect little tiny 4 patch. And it takes all the bulk out of that seam.
So you don't clip it or anything?
No.
Okay.
Just to press it open.
And then I have one more thing to tell you about backing. I don't know how we skipped over this, but it's so super important. Please do not join your backing selvage to selvage and not cut off the selvage.
Yes.
You have got to get rid of that selvage edge, okay? It stretches different, it affects everything differently, it pulls different against the stitch, it just,
It's a mess.
I honestly stitch down the edge of my selvage, and then I trim it off, and then I stitch a 1/2 inch in, and then I go back and stitch the other stitch off, so I know I got it all.
amazes me, almost everybody that brings a quilt or sends a quilt to me, they stitch the selvage in there, and I'm like, what?
Yep.
You know, because it washes differently when you, the needle goes through it differently, so when you're longarming, it really can affect it.
And it pulls differently, so it'll take your perfectly square backing and make it look like this, or,
Selvages together, but stitch inside, so you still have a 1/4 inch before that selvage, and then you can just snip it off after.
I waste so much. I'm sure it'll quilt out, but I'm like, no, I want none of my salvage in there, so yeah. Any other
And
questions?
the other thing is like, people don't, a lot of women don't do math. And math is an intricate part of quilting. And so it's, instead of telling people I need 4 inches on each side, I say, okay, your quilt is 40 by 50. I need it to be 10 inches bigger than your quilt, all the way around. So 10 inches on this side is gonna be 50, and 10 inches on this side is gonna make 60. So I need a 50 by 60 piece of backing.
And then you have to
10 inches or
decide,
12 inches
mark if there's a top on both your backing.
and quilt.
That one, my design goes this way, because I was using that fabric because that's what I had. But my design goes this way, but it's just little weeds, so it's not a big deal. You had a question.
I just say, keep promoting your Idaho quilt. We're 5 count Zoe's, healthy Zoe.
Are you Zoe's grandma?
We're sorry.
Zoe, can I tell you guys about Zoe real quick?
I'm her 4-H sewing leader.
No, small world here.
We're sorry.
So,
I get to see her on Friday.
Yeah.
For the fair.
so every time that we teach a class, I know I'm like super out of time, but every time that we teach a class, we focus on a skill. Our next class is going to be Drunkard's Path. We're focusing on the curved seam, right? So we've done applique. That was one of the skills we focused on. What else have we done? The Lone Star was a whole thing in itself, but it was about getting a lot of times it's about getting that scant 1/4 inch. So we did one called Sugar Twist, and it's all on the bias. You sew everything together straight, but you have to have consistent seams because then you're going to cut it on the bias, right? So when we do Idaho, we do that about once a year. The whole point is for you to pick fabric. So you get to come into the quilt shop and you get to pick whatever fabric you want. And I'm pretty sure Zoe went and pulled down every bolt of fabric and cut 1 5-inch square out of every bolt of fabric. And so she's got kitty cats, and she's got Halloween, and she's got Christmas. And if you see it back there, she's got a square. She pulled one of everything. Oh, adorable. Again, Eastern Idaho State Fairs, hers was the one that was in the 4-H building. Blue ribbon in which county in Wyoming? Teton County? Her quilt?
She's a Blackfoot.
But didn't she put it in the Teton County quilt?
I don't think so.
She
Sure.
No, it has to go in Beaver. At Eastern Idaho State.
Yeah. She had it in another, I don't know. Okay. Anyway,
She didn't say anything to us.
what? Yeah, that one was so super fun because she got to do what she wanted to do.
Her first quilt.
Yeah.
First, so.
She was, the little young girl that did all of the different. Yeah, there was actually 11 Idaho quilts in the fair last year.
Oh, wow.
2 of them were mine.
Good job, Annie.
Yeah, it's fun.
It was fun.
I was just heartbroken and sitting in my little apartment in Germany, being like, graph paper and Idaho put a little heart.
Yes, right. One other thing on your backing, I've been told, is they prefer to have your seam run horizontal rather than vertical. Yeah. Because it doesn't.
Stretch is different.
When you,
Yeah.
bulks up around the leader, around the bar there. And you know what I do? It's like a lot of people won't do that. They'll put, it takes a lot of fabric. So I will turn the quilt, instead of quilting it up and down like this, I'll turn it this way.
So that
I'll have
you're-
the back,
yeah.
the seam is going this way in the back, and the whole quilt, the top's down here, maybe you're up here with whatever way.
As long
Then
as
turn the
somebody's
design.
giving you the right amount of backing, it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could make it.
Well, and really, it does create a problem. On my machine, I can't put that much tension on, so if we had that much tension that vertical seam,
Yeah,
it would break my needle.
yeah.
I said a few things about batting, but specifically,
So using a poly batting so that the fluffy quilt,
oh,
as far as stitching, like.
A wool
bigger
batting, I'll
patterns.
give you a nice puff, a wool batting.
that is something to talk to, again, not a professional. The puffier ones will give you more. The puffier battings with the smaller stitches are gonna give you uber lots of detail. And then as you go, lower loft, bigger stitches, you're gonna even out. It just kind of goes with this loft, this stitch. I am a Warman Company girl. That's what I know.
Natural, yeah.
Yeah. I like the warm and cozy. It's super heavy sometimes.
Sometimes you can use double layers of batting if you want to use like a warm and natural, but you want it thicker. I have a client that uses warm and natural, and then she uses the Tuscany wool on top of it. And it gives you a lot of loft. I mean, there's a lot of dimension in the quilting with that. And it's a very warm quilt.
I just used fleece on my tree skirt this year, just so I had a little bit of, you can kind of see it, but I didn't want to do anything expensive or didn't need a lot of detail.
I'm using a bamboo right now that I really
I
like.
heard a lot
It
about the
really has
bamboo.
a nice drape to it.
Hey, I'm over. I know I'm out of time.
You're good. We've got 10 minutes.
Oh, I have more questions. Laura Lee does have to show off the quilt from last year though, so I don't know if Annie wants to do that or
What?
the last year's quilt.
Yeah.
Can I log off?
What's that? What do you have, a children's path class?
March. Do you follow us on Facebook? Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, but I don't have, do you have a card? I don't.
Craft shop.
The
The craft shop. Dot Blackfoot. Yep.
These are put together really nice.
Which one was yours? Which one was yours?
So how are you going to fill this?
Which one?
I don't know yet. My first book that I can back there.
Which squares were yours?
Yours
Yours goes on the back, right?
I only got half.